a busy hospital runs an outpatient department, serving approximately 250 patients per day, from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. The OPD currently operates with 10 clinic rooms, 2 assessment rooms, 3 pharmacy counters and 2 registration counters. With an increasing number of patients in need of treatment on a daily basis, the hospital is now faced with problems of long waiting times and unimaginable bottleneck problems. Patients are frustrated, dissatisfied, and unhappy with the service, and hospital staff are exhausted. To understand where the problem lies, a simulation model was developed, based on the historical data collected from the outpatient clinic for the last 6 months. This model mimics the day-to-day operations of the outpatient clinic. Patients are registered with a processing time of 4 to 8 minutes. This is considered long enough to enter the patient's record in the system. Patients are assessed between 5 to 10 minutes. And patients are being seen by the doctor at around 15 to 20 minutes. At around 9 a.m., we can observe from the model that around 15 patients are already lining up in the queue at the registration counters. This accounts for 95% utilization rate for both counters. Also, the 2 assessment rooms are 92% fully utilized. Similarly, the waiting area is slowly getting crowded, with patients waiting for their turn to be assessed. From this angle, we can see that the clinic rooms are mostly empty or idle, because patients are still waiting to be assessed. By the time the clock hits 11:30 a.m., both registration counters are already at 97% utilization, and just the same, the 2 assessment rooms are 92% fully utilized. Patients are not optimally distributed into the clinic rooms, because of the blockage observed in registration and assessment. Now let's take a look at the results to validate our observations. This graph indicates that 76.6% of the total patient's time inside the hospital is spent waiting for services. The 2 assessment rooms and 2 registration counters are highly utilized. These locations are inadequate to cater to all patients, that is why bottleneck in these areas are very high. The utilization rate of the clinic rooms are very low because patients are still stuck in the registration or waiting area for assessment. This graph tells us that there are 37 patients on average waiting in queue at the registration area and 66 patients waiting to be assessed at the waiting area. This accounts for almost 50% of the total daily patient volume. This graph is indicative of how utilized the locations are inside the outpatient department. The clinics are underutilized. While registration and assessment areas are overutilized. Now that we have already identified the problems in the first model, what I am going to show you now is the optimized version of the first model. After meeting with all of the process owners, such as doctors and nurses, we have tweaked some of the input variables from the previous model to see if this can address the problems we have identified. By reducing the processing time in the registration area from 4 to 8 minutes to 2 to 4 minutes. By adding 1 assessment room. And by reducing the processing time in the assessment room from 5 to 10 minutes to 3 to 7 minutes. By looking at the model, we can already observe some improvements. This is evident by the reduction of patients in the queue. At the registration counters, the waiting area is no longer crowded. Patients are also now evenly distributed into the 10 clinic rooms. Now, let's look at the charts derived from the optimized model to validate our observations. Patient experience is significantly improved, as most of the time of the patients inside the facility were doing value-added activities. We can even see in the chart that all locations were utilized. Queues at the registration counters were reduced to none at all. Few patients were waiting in the waiting area. Clinic rooms were efficiently utilized. Patients are now seen by doctors on time, instead of spending their time in the waiting area.